Do you want to be a great listener? In this video, I'm going to tell you what great listeners actually do. Hi everybody, I'm Bruce Lambert from HowCommunicationWorks.com. This is a channel where I teach you communication skills so you can improve your relationships, succeed at work, advance in your career, and be more confident. I was recently reading an article by Jack Zenger and Joseph Folkman, and they were talking about listening. It was in a book about empathy in general, but their chapter was entitled, "What do great listeners actually do?" And when I read it, I immediately thought of you guys and that you would benefit also from these simple ideas about the habits of great listeners. So these two authors went into a large organization, interviewed thousands of people, and identified the top 5% of listeners, people who were identified by all their colleagues as great listeners. And then they looked at what characteristics that they have that other people lacked. And that's what I'm going to describe to you today. These three characteristics that great listeners have, three things that great listeners do. So here they are. Number one, good listening is more than sitting there silently. Good listening is active. It's engaged. Good listening is actually a dialogue. We make a mistake when we think that good listening is passive and simply receptive. But the best listeners in this group actively participated in dialogues with the people that they were listening to, often asking clarifying questions, making supportive statements, and engaging in a constructive dialogue. So number one, good listening is more than just sitting silently. Number two, good listening supports the speaker's self-esteem and confidence. One of your jobs as a good listener is to create a safe environment where the other person feels at ease and comfortable talking about whatever it is they need to talk about, maybe talking about difficult things, being vulnerable. So good listening bolsters the self-esteem and confidence of the other person, creates a safe space for them to be vulnerable, to open up and talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. Number three, good listening is a cooperative activity. It is not argumentative, it is not critical, and it is not judgmental. So when you're listening to someone, you are cooperating with them in an activity, and the main purpose of that activity is to get in sync with one another, to increase the stock of common knowledge between you, maybe to deepen the relationship, but it isn't to judge or criticize or argue or compete. So good listening is cooperative, not competitive, not judgmental, not critical. This doesn't mean you can never challenge the person who's talking to you. It doesn't mean you can't ask clarifying questions or question their assumptions, but it has to be done in a spirit of cooperation and help. It can't be perceived as attempting to one-up the other person or belittle them or make them feel stupid. It has to be done in this spirit of cooperation. So, as I said before, good listening is active and cooperative. So it means you can question people, but it has to be done in this spirit of cooperation. And it has to always be obvious that you're attempting to help and be cooperative in this joint venture. Good listeners make suggestions. This runs counter to some typical advice we get about listening, which is never to focus on problem solving, always to focus on the emotions. But the best listeners in this group were often found to make suggestions. Now, they were constructive suggestions. They were helpful suggestions. They weren't critical or judgmental suggestions. But because listening is this cooperative activity, of course, the best listeners, once they hear something where they might have something of constructive to offer, they make suggestions. And the best listeners were always in the habit of making constructive suggestions. This doesn't mean they were exclusively focused on problem solving or they were hijacking the conversation to change it to their own agenda. But when they found an opportunity to make a constructive contribution based on what had been going on in the dialogue, they felt free to make suggestions. This runs counter to the evidence or the advice that we get sometimes, which is never problem solve, only just listen and focus on feelings. But if you are constructively engaged in this cooperative activity with another person, it's only natural that you would make suggestions if you have constructive input to offer. So that's it. 3 quick suggestions about how you can improve your listening by identifying the characteristics of excellent listeners, what good listeners actually do. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel And if you do, click that notification bell so that YouTube will let you know when we post new videos. Consider giving this video a like, and down below in the comments, say hello to me and tell us what you think of the video. Tell us what you think are the characteristics of great listeners. And go on over to howcommunicationworks.com, where you can download our free ebook when you sign up for the mailing list. You can fill out a form to make an appointment with me for a one-on-one coaching session, and you can read all the blog entries about communication skills and communication theory and all the other topics we've covered on the blog. Thanks so much for watching. I deeply appreciate your time. We'll see you next time.